Welcome to the Archway of Hope podcast. My name is Chip Wilson, and I will be your host, where we cover things from loss, grief, and providing hope for those who have lost someone too early. All right, well, welcome back to another episode of the Archway of Hope podcast. Today, we're going to make it a little interactive. If you're listening to this, we really encourage you to go to our Facebook page. Archway of Hope has a Facebook page, our website, archwayofhope.org. We have a YouTube channel as well. Just look up Archway of Hope. You'll find multiple ways to connect with us. And on today's episode, what we want to talk about is the uniqueness of grief. You know, everybody kind of goes through it in their own way, and some of the different things that people do to process grief. And what we're looking for is uniqueness. So if you have any stories or things that you did or ways that helped you, please share it with us. Send us an email at archwayofhope.org, or again, go on our Facebook page. If you see this podcast on Facebook or on our channels, please comment, send us a note, let us know, because we're really interested in what other people have to say. So again, today I have with me Dr. Christy Donaldson, Paul Allison. I'm Chip Wilson. This is Lorna Herring. And we want to talk about grief and the way we process it and the difference grief is dealt with. Christy, you know, you see a lot of patients, a lot of people you work with. Is there a normal path to grief? Is there a 10-step process we should go through?
I say nay. I would say absolutely not, but I know that there is preconceived ideas about what that should look like, the length of time, the way that you should go about grieving. You know, there's also different religious practices into grief that also play an important role, cultural differences to grief and practices that way. But really, honestly, your grief is like your fingerprint. It's all your own, you know, and it looks different for every single person. And what one person might need is maybe the exact opposite of what another person needs. And so we always want to carefully give ideas and thoughts and, you know, connections with others over our own ideas that would help them, you know, because that can be something that would not work for them to try. So
when we use the word grief, we all have had grief. Every single one of us in this room has had grief. But are there different levels of grief? You know, I didn't get the job I wanted. There's grief there. There's, you know, a girlfriend broke up with me when I was in 8th grade. That's grief. Losing a child, totally different type of grief. At least I think it is. Is it?
I think that grief and loss look a little bit different. So we might grieve the loss of a job, right? But that would be very different from grieving the life of a child. It looks very different. Now, for some people, say they don't have a child and they lost everything that they had in a stock market crash, right? That would be very significant to them. But they have the hope and ability to possibly build back. Once a person's life is gone, you're not bringing that person's life back to where it was before. And the finality of that is something very different. So I would say not the same. I would say I don't know about levels because it depends on the background. It depends on the stability, the support system, the financial security of the person, you know, what their life looks like daily, their mental health component, how strong that was, you know, their physical health, how strong that was. It definitely depends on all of those things as well. They all play a role in how well, you know, a person can push through each of the moments that they're going to go through over their next part of their life.
Well, that's very insightful. I know that when I kind of started on this journey, because the Herrings brought me into it, and Lorna here, one of the unique things about Lorna, and trust me, she has lots of unique things about her, but one of the unique things about Lorna that really fascinated me in the beginning is when she started to talk about Rhett's story. She said, it was really important to me when I met others who had lost someone too early that I wanted all of the details. And to this day,
You always ask me about that.
I still wonder the need to know the details. Where do you think that comes from, or what hole does that fix for you?
I guess as a mother, you know so much about your child. Honestly, a mom knows more of the ins and outs of everyday life about their child than the dad does. I mean, we grocery shop for them. We know what they want at the grocery. We know how they like this and that and this and that. And so there was just something to me when someone else had lost a child, to sit down in that space with them and hear it all. I want to hear it all. And some of it, my heart, it's like you the water would level out. I've been there. And then others, I'd be like, I don't, it's not a comparison thing. It's just the fact that you want to tell somebody your whole story and you want to hear their whole story. And there's something so therapeutic in hearing it all. And it makes you feel less alone. Makes you feel like, wow, there are parts of your story that are grueling. And then there are parts of your story that are endearing, and there are parts of your story that are horrific, and there are parts of your story that are hopeful, and you just want their whole story. Tell me everything. And when you can hear that from another mother, and they've survived and they can tell you everything, it's just therapeutic to me. Now, maybe that's not the same with everybody else, but with many of the moms I've met, we share our stories, and there's beauty in that, and there's life in that.
Well, I can tell you our entire documentary series is built on that foundation of getting to know the person that we've lost. We call that Act 1. Act 2 is the event. And that is shot in a dark environment on purpose because we know there's such a heaviness with it. And then part 3 is providing hope and talking about how you've overcome it. And all of our documentaries are done that way 100% because it's important to you, so it's important to us. And if you feel that way, I'm sure there's others.
I know that other mothers feel that way too.
Yeah.
I know that they do. Well, and I'm curious as to, throughout all of the different families you've spoken to and been working with, what are some of the things that they've experienced that Lorna could also give insight on that she would experience differently? And so I know y'all were talking about one earlier that I was thinking in particular.
Yeah, one, Paul and I are in charge of kind of doing the interviews on all these documentaries, and I always find it interesting when we talk about the event and we interview the entire family and friends and extended family, that there's a lot of emotion tied with the majority, but every once in a while we'll get someone that'll come in, we'll interview them, and they'll talk about their process. Never shed a tear. It's very as a matter of fact, like the entire event from when it happened to, doesn't matter how many years in we are, that it's somewhat, I don't want to say non-emotional, at least on camera it hasn't been. And I always find that really interesting. Again, understanding that grief there's not a path for grief. Everybody has their own path. But with your family, I mean, there was buckets. We should have had buckets everywhere. There was so much crying going on, and tissues and napkins, where others we've interviewed that we've had people kind of go through the whole process and tell us about the day of the event in detail, but not have the same level of emotion. And in my mind, I always think, do they care as much about the details as others that really pour their heart into it?
And that will be one of those moments when somebody will say, well, they must not care as much as the other person. And that is just a misnomer. Maybe they cannot go there yet. Maybe they're not to that spot, or maybe they don't feel safe to do that, or, maybe they weren't raised in a home where they were allowed to do that. Or they haven't learned it along the way.
Yeah. Well, I think the subject you're talking about, and I think I know the person you're talking about, they had even mentioned, I think they felt the need to mention, listen, I have my time alone where I cry a lot, but just in the public view, I don't know if maybe that's a built-in protection, kind of to not be vulnerable in that way when, talking to people or something like that. But it is interesting the different ways that people will deal with things, especially when they're in the public eye. And what I think we're almost most common with when they're talking about the day of, or the taking us through their story, is there's a point where everybody breaks a little bit, and there's quite a bit of emotion, or some emotion, but it's important for us to realize. And you talked about all the different variables to take into consideration when the grief process, the way people were raised, what they have going on in their life, their current situation in life, whether it be a socioeconomic situation or relational situation. There's so many variables that whole comparative grief thing breaks down pretty quickly, because it's hard to know where different people are.
Yeah,
So,
for sure.
Yeah, I know a lady that absolutely adored her daughter. The loss is devastating, but she will flat tell me, I don't break down. I'm afraid if I ever really let myself go, I'll never come back. So I've seen her tear up maybe, but she is never going to open those floodgates, because she says, I won't recover.
Self-preservation.
I will not recover.
Well, does that tie back to, in some of our documentaries, in the interviews, we have people say, I went to the gravesite for the funeral and I haven't been back since.
I haven't been back since, it should have been the beginning of Rhett's senior year, so 2016. It's 2023.
So why?
He's not there, and there's something so terrible to me about looking at it in stone. Looking at that written in stone, and the beginning dates and the end dates and his beautiful name. I just don't like it. I know a lot of people do. I'm a runner. I don't even run. That was a route I always ran. It's my 5-mile route, and I found another way to go. I don't want to run by that graveyard and know my boy's in there. It's just heartbreaking. And for some, it's peaceful. It's just it's not a happy place for me at all.
In one of our documentaries, girl was killed in a car wreck, 16 years old, and the mom wanted to go see where it happened. So she's been to the spot on the interstate where it happened. Dad has zero interest of going, doesn't care, care is the wrong word, doesn't want to go there, doesn't feel the need to go see where it happened. Both love their daughter tremendously, committed all those things, but one needs to see it, one doesn't. It fascinates me how the grief process works for different ways.
Yeah, and it even goes, we were talking about like viewing the body or not viewing the body, if it's an opportunity as such, right? Or even in the funeral home, having something open and viewing and allowing others to view, or closing and not extending that. All of those are differences for everyone. And how do you make that decision?
Yeah. Do you think there's, and I'll go back to the last documentary we had, the mother wanted, she rushed to be with her son, Jackson, and he was already in the hospital, passed away, and she spent an hour and a half with him and just wanted to stay with him as long as she possibly could. Where others, like, I want to remember him the way he was before the accident. I don't want to see him now. Do you know, is there any research or anything that goes to...
I didn't think I could live. When I showed up on the scene and Jimmy said, Lorna, he's beautiful. He's not mangled. There's no blood. He's beautiful. And I was on the ground because I had just been told, and he was over in like a morgue truck or something. You really need to go see him. And I looked at Jimmy and said, I do not want to see him. I kissed him goodbye 2 hours ago to go shopping. I literally thought my heart would stop if I looked at him. I thought, if I look at that boy and he's not alive, I don't want to see it. I don't want to touch him. I don't want to... I look back. I looked one time when the funeral home had him ready. 2 days later, I looked, broke down. But even the night that we did the visitation, I never turned back around and looked at him. And there are times I never touched him. There are times that I think maybe I should have, but at the same time, I knew what my heart was capable of, and I physically thought I was going to die, and the thought of looking at him. And then we're to Jimmy. Jimmy said it was beautiful. Like, I know he was in peace. I could feel his peace. And that, you know, that's beautiful. And he honored me, and I honored. He tells me to this day, I think you did right, Lorna. And I think he did right, but it was not an option for me. I could not look at my boy. Not the same kid that I just left to go run errands, and it just wasn't even an option. It never crossed my mind once when he said I could do that. I was actually mad at him for telling me I could go look.
You wanted to remember the warmth of his last touch.
I just didn't even want it to be real. And the thought of seeing it made it more real. And no, just a resounding no.
So now you're 7.5 years out. Still happy with?
Yeah, I think it was probably a good decision for me. Like you just said, I'm the kind that wants to know everything. And I think I would have taken so much of that in, and some of it would haunt me. Yeah. When I remember that blonde-haired, blue-eyed boy who walked into my room that morning and asked me what my Bible study was about, and he was dirty because he'd already been outside and laid on my white bedspread and just full of life. I didn't want to see him not full of life. I didn't want to see that.
What about his bedroom? Because I know Rhett's room...
Still the same.
Still the same 7.5 years later.
Yeah.
Nothing's changed.
No, and that's a really hard subject for us. His retainer's still beside the bed. Sheets have never been changed. Dirty clothes are still in the dirty clothes. We still clean it. We vacuum and dust, that kind of stuff. But we are about to repaint our house, and all the walls are that tan that was real popular, and I want it white. I want a white background. And so we were drinking coffee last Saturday morning, and Jimmy said, okay, I'm cool with doing the house white. And I'm just going to say it. We got to let Rhett's room go when we do this. We got to pack it up.
What was that like to hear that?
We'll make it white. We'll paint it white. And he said, I'm not ready to get rid of the stuff. We'll put it in boxes and we'll put it upstairs. But I guess we just can't, and honestly, it's been him more than me. I'm not ready to get rid of his room by any means, but I don't know. It's going to be a big deal. Like, we haven't even talked about painting again since then, because that will be a realization we'll have to face that then, and that's hard.
Just another process of healing.
Yeah, it's another process of letting go, and it's just his room. It's just his room, and he has a big fat head on the wall of himself playing football. He got it for Christmas. He loved it. He's little when he had it, but Jimmy said we'll try to get that off in one piece, and we'll put it up. So we have a game room upstairs. We'll move some of the pieces around. We'll maybe give some of the stuff to Goodwill, but we'll keep. But then I had this thought, oddly enough, yesterday by myself doing dishes. We got to be careful about what we keep, because I don't want Ron and Mara one day to have to make the choice to get rid of it. And we're not hoarders. Everything I have, if I don't need it, I let go of it. And I don't want them to go up the attic one day and it be their job to let go of it. I don't want to put that on them. So we'll have to figure this out, maybe let go of little bits of it. And there's some of it we'll never let go of. That's tough. The bedroom's tough. It really is.
Well, and remember that you can video and you can take pictures and you can make a book out of it, or, whatever you want to do. And you can keep a box of items, a large box, and put it in, there for whenever they're both ready to go through it as well. Things that you felt were important, or go through it with them and see what's important, and then, put it away and label it.
And as the kids get older, we want to make that room, repaint the walls. It's got bunk beds, leave the bunk beds, but make it a place where the grandkids can hang out, and a happy place. And
yeah, and y'all can talk about Uncle Rhett then,
yeah.
Like
that'll be a
cool about him.
A zero fun bridge to cross. Yeah. Almost to the point maybe we'll just paint next summer, but we'll figure it out.
Do you see different cultures? Is there an expectation culturally in different cultures how you're expected to grieve that sometimes makes it difficult for the individual to grieve in their own way?
Yeah, there are some, religious beliefs of a time period where you sit, in that space for, so many days, 10,
sitting Shiva.
30. Yeah, where you're sitting there in that space and the people come to you and you're present. There's different cultures where there are, processes of decor and, certain clothing that you wear for particular, purposes and things that you put on and adornments, and whatnot. And that's a process, right? And then there is our American, way of doing things, and even for other cultures that are in America now, where our American way is to just believe that you're supposed to get over it. Like, okay, it's been 3 days. What are you doing? And maybe not technically 3 days, but you get the idea of just this expectation of like, well, there's work to be done. There's things to get on with. We can't sit like this all day, right? And that is one of the hardest things that you can ever, experience, is the people around you expecting you to grieve the way that they need you to, not even want, but they need you to get over it. It's hard being around you, and it's hard doing things without you. So you need to be done. And that's just not the way that grief works. So I think culturally, as a society, the way that we've been taught to grieve fast and push past it and be done with it, the way that other countries grieve and do things, and then religious groups are all different in how they do it. So yeah, there's a lot of differences in grief.
So because if you're pushed to be done with it, you're not really done with it.
I mean,
Just...
Lorna just told us about that, right? 7
really
years later,
she
she was not allowed to, or 5 years later, she was not allowed to be done.
Yeah.
So,
right.
Her brain was holding the story.
Yeah.
I think I've talked about that before, but Bessel van der Kolk talks about the body keeping the score, right? That's
I still have your book.
Yes, that's a very well-known comment, and area that we all recognize now from, his wonderful research and writings. And I do see that day in and day out in the clinic about how much the body holds traumatic experiences, and also like the way that physiologically we experience those later on, via triggers, or the way that we used to be able to handle a small challenge, and now it's over the top, overwhelming. And it's because we haven't, I always say it's like Sarah Cynthia Stout from an old Shel Silverstein poem, who didn't take the garbage out. And basically the poem goes on to say that over time, it basically like took her with it, right? That trash.
You're not going to believe this, but I know that poem by heart.
Let's
I'll
hear
tell
it.
you.
I want to hear
Do
it.
it. I
Sarah
love it.
Cynthia Sylvia Stout would not take the garbage out. She'd scour the pots and scrape the pans, candy the yams and spice the hams. But though her parents would scream and shout, she simply would not take the garbage out. And so it piled up to the ceilings. Banana peels, something I could go on and on. But
Yeah.
Wow.
And but yeah, isn't that great? But I mean, I love
Why?
it.
I
in
am
the world
full
do
of
you- I was
useless
gonna say,
talents.
Yes.
Don't ever. Yeah.
Yes, I love that one, and I too know many parts of it, not all of it together, but I use that all the time, because that's the same thing with grief, right? When we're rushed to deal with it and get past it, or we don't choose to deal with it, right? Then it's almost like a trash compactor. It can only press for so long, and then it can't reduce the trash anymore. And so when we think about like the yuck that you're going through when you're feeling overwhelmed, and we use that metaphorically as the trash, at some point, the trash has to be taken out or it's taking over. And essentially that's what that poem is about. And that reminds me of grief, and losses and things that we just don't want to deal with. Just like you said with your heart a minute ago, maybe that's something we'll just do next year, right? Push down, push down another time. Maybe I can't do it now. And when you're ready, you will. You'll know. But, it's hard. It's hard to do that. So
Well, we've noticed in working with these different families that it's interesting. Some people have to go back to work within a couple of weeks because financially they don't have a choice, where other families are more fortunate, where they can take more time, more frequent breaks, and not have the stress of the financial world and work responsibilities on them. And I don't know if that plays a big difference in grief. If
I think some people, it does them well to go back to work. And I think some people, it does them well not to go back to work. And you're right, some people don't have a choice, and that's an awful place to be in. But Jimmy going back to work, that was better for him than sitting and thinking. And me going back to work was a disaster. So after a week, I resigned. I needed a different type of healing. I needed more time. I needed downtime. I couldn't think. I could not think. So yeah,
so how do you balance the realities of life with the reality of what you're dealing with?
man.
It's not easy.
No, and I think that you have to find the places, the resources available to you, like we've talked about here before too, about like being able to find a resource like what y'all are providing now too, to find somebody else who has experienced something that maybe just for a second you can hold on to help you move forward. One more step, one more air into your lungs, kind of moment. And through that, then you start discovering the journey and the path you're on. And sometimes by trial and error, right? You went back and it didn't work out. And you had to get out of that, and that's absolutely okay. It would have been far greater of a detriment to stay in there than to walk away. But you had to know. You wouldn't have known unless you had tried it. And there's no harm in that either. It's just like going to that thing 3 days later, that you weren't ready for, but how would you have known? It could have turned around and been the greatest thing you ever experienced, and somebody else it might. But it's individualized.
Yeah.
So.
Well, I know that one of the things we've learned through this process is traditions and people doing different things. The last documentary we just did with Jackson and his family, every year on his heaven date, they get together and release balloons, blue balloons, and sometimes they put messages in them. And if you're listening to this, and we know balloons are not good for the environment, we know that, but that's their tradition. That's what they do. And it's been a good healing process for their family. They mentioned some years they come and, they each bring a scripture with them. Sometimes they come and just tell a story that they remember about Jackson. But it's a tradition to get together once a year on his heaven date, release these balloons and spend time together. And it's been healing for them. I don't know if the rhythm of those traditions is powerful enough that everyone should do it, or if it's just something they do. But for them, I know it's been very beneficial.
And I know some people will do more of like something that gives back to the community. So they might, build something that others can use, or they may deliver Meals on Wheels that day, or they may
Go pay for a birthday cake.
Go pay for somebody's birthday cake unsuspectingly, or something like that. They'll find ways to honor that loved one and their own, passage through the time of healing in a different way than others. And then some people will do balloon releases. I've worked with families when they knew that death was imminent, but it was going to be quick, like, a type of cancer or something like that. And I've had them create video messages to the children and loved ones and things like that. And they'll watch that, on specific holidays and traditions. And that's not exactly what we have the opportunity to do in a moment loss, right? But that is another way to go about doing that. And you can create video, I guess some kind of video from previous videos you have of those people and put them into something, and you can watch that, on that year and just remember the life of that person. So like in your case, it would be all the things y'all have of Rhett, looking at them, seeing all those videos put together into one space, or reading things that he wrote, or putting all of his little kid artwork into a book that you can keep forever and looking back at it, and also having those available to you just when you need them. You need that little
something we do in our bathroom, that is the bathroom where everybody that comes to the house goes. It's just our powder room, but there's a frame in there, and I change Rhett's picture out in there all the time. Like if I know someone's coming over and I have a picture of them in red, I'll put it in there. But Jimmy always says he likes it because he's like, sometimes I feel like, oh, look at what Rhett's doing. Like he's doing something now. And I never tell him, but he'll go in. He's like, oh, I love that picture you put in there. If it's Travis's birthday and Travis is coming over, I'll find a picture of Travis and Rhett Jed. And so it changes, and it just feels
where's Waldo?
new.
You could have
Yes,
pictures
it just
of Rhett
feels
around the
new.
house and just
But it's
move
this
them around all
one
the time.
frame, and it's so fun because like if it's Valentine, I'll try to find a picture of Valentine, or if it's hunting season, I have tons of him from hunting season, or Christmas, I'll find one of him and Santa, or and that's just kind of fun. The coolest to me was the day that Jimmy said, I love that. It shocks me. It's like Rhett showed, oh, look, Rhett just showed up in a different picture, and it's just,
cool idea.
It's new and
that is
now
so special.
fun.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, I love that. And it's interactive. It keeps it kind of.
And it's really cool if like we sometimes host showers at my house, and it's all these kids that Rhett grew up with, and if I'll throw a picture of one of them and him in there, and they'll like, hey, come back, or they'll, Mom, come look at this, and it's just fun.
Well, and
keeps him present here now.
Yes, and I was going to say, and I think it makes the people in his life feel relevant, right? Like you see them.
Yeah.
So in the beginning, we talked about like, what about me? Like I'm experiencing this grief too, as your person that you've been with all these years, and I was just talking to him as well, and things like that. And we all want to feel relevant for what we're experiencing in that moment. But it's hard when the people that have the greatest loss are the ones that, are immediate. But this is a way of coming back years later whenever you're ready. And not only do you get a fun little kick out of waiting for everybody to go in there, I could see the delight on your face
like
right
if Mara's
now.
coming home, I'll throw one of Mara and Red in there.
I love
She's
that.
Like, oh, I love the new pic. And
But it's also honoring to those people saying, I see that you've been on this journey with us. And I want to remind you.
That's what I like. Remember how much you loved Red.
Yes, and that we love it. So
Well, I think, for a future podcast, just a handful of years ago, I learned about Day of the Dead with the Hispanic culture. And I didn't know what it was. And for those who don't know what it was like me, I thought all these skulls and stuff was like the Mexican version of Halloween, but it's not. De la Mortis is remembering the dead. And every year, once a year, you remember the people that have passed away. And the whole tradition of it is, as long as we remember them, they'll always be with us. But if we start to forget and remember them, that when the last memory of them is forgotten, that's when they're gone forever. So the Day of the Dead, or De la Mortis, is really about remembering those that were in your life that aren't here anymore. And there's a kids movie, cartoon called Coco that I watched, and I'm telling you,
You cried like a baby.
I did. I cried like a baby. It was. I had no idea what it was about until I watched it, and I thought, that's what you are doing, what we're all doing in a way. I didn't tie it to that tradition, but that's what it is. It's about keeping the memory alive and always keeping the memory alive, whether it's taking pictures and moving it around the house, or telling stories, or releasing balloons, or whatever it is. It's how do we continually remember the life.
You know what? I need to correct a statement earlier. When you said, is there something that everybody always does or needs or says, or is there some kind of like link that you hear over and over again? And there is one thing, and that is, I don't want to ever forget that this person was real to me, and that they lived, and that they were important, and that we saw them no matter the loss. Like if it was at the beginning conception or life, or at the very tail end of what we think about on a lifespan, that person was relevant, right? And that is the one common thread that I see every single time. So keeping that alive, in memories and discussions and, home movies and experiences, pictures, interactive wise.
Well,
that
so
all is important.
7.5 years later, do you look at pictures different?
Yes, I still have a little bit of trouble watching anything live. It's really hard to hear his voice and see his animated laugh and all that stuff. I mean, I can do it. It's still a little painful, but pictures are fun now. Where at first pictures were just grueling. Just, that boy, those blue eyes, those dimples, that blonde hair, he was so happy. He always had this way of making you feel special. And then the pictures hurt too much. But now you look at the pictures and you feel special again. Like, oh, that's my boy. I can see him smiling. I can see him, with Wyatt on the four-wheeler. I can see him, him and Mara dressed alike, or he and Ryan in their underwear in the kitchen, when they're 2 years old. And they're happy again.
Yeah. Well, how about when we shot the documentary for Rhett, he had a cute little girlfriend that was in the documentary. Yeah, Bella.
She's amazing.
Yeah. So you're going to see Bella over the years grow up and maybe get married and have kids.
She has a serious boyfriend now. She brought him to us and introduced us to him.
Really? Yeah.
And Rhett's best buddy that was in his grade is getting married in June or July the 14th. It's a Saturday night. No, it's a Friday night. And Jimmy and I are going to go. I'm sure had Cade and Rhett continued, they'd been each other's, super close-up groomsmen, maybe best men. And there's going to be a little bit of sadness there. But I saw Cade coming out of the grocery store. He goes to Texas Tech, so I hadn't seen him in a long time. I saw him come out of the grocery store about 2 months ago. And when he was walking towards me, he had a camo hat on. It was just so, and I'm not kidding, a part of me expected Rhett to be behind him. They were just always together in their camo hats and and he wrapped his arms around me. And when I left, I called Jimmy, and I was driving and I was crying. Like, wow, Jimmy, I just saw Kate. It was so beautiful. I just thought Rhett would be with him. And he said, did you bring up Rhett? I said, I didn't want to. And while I'm talking to Jimmy, I get a text. I pull over and it's a long text from Cade about, hey, I just want you to know I felt Rhett when we were there. He's in every moment of my life, every big moment. And he was with us right then. And it just made my heart sore that, that he felt that too. And we both felt like we should bring up Rhett, but he didn't know if he should, and I didn't want to. But Rhett was really present for both of us to be in different places, going, wait a minute, we left out something really important in our relationship. We have to talk about Rhett.
Yeah.
So it'll be fun to watch him get married. It'll be a little bit heartbreaking, but my goodness, I want the best for all those kiddos. And that's how Rhett lives on. He lives on with these kids that keep remembering him and loving him, and they go do good things and multiply, and let's do it.
Yeah.
Let's celebrate.
Yeah.
Well, Rhett will never be forgotten. As long as Archway of Hope's around, we're going to keep bringing him up over and over and over again.
Rhett's not going to be forgotten.
Along with everybody else. Yeah.
That's right. Well, we, and that's one thing we want to do at Archway of Hope, is tell these stories for remembrance sake. Tell these stories so that they do provide hope to others that are in this same situation. They've lost someone too early that they deeply care about. And by us telling these stories, whether it's the documentaries, the videos, the podcasts, our 10-word tributes on our Archway of Hope website, whatever method we tell the stories, we want them to provide the same thing you provide when you walk into someone's house and they look at you and they think, what is she going to tell me? She has something to tell me that I'm going to latch on to. And although it's not in person necessarily through Archway of Hope, we want to be that organization that you look to say, y'all are going to say something that I really need to hear right now that I'm going to hang on to.
It's a terrible club, but the only thing worse than it being a terrible club is to go through that terrible thing by yourself.
Right.
The club,
You need it.
yeah.
Yeah.
It's awful that you're in there, but don't do it alone. At least surround yourself with some stories and some hope and some people that have walked that path. I am who I am today and survived it because of people that went ahead of me and looked back and put their hand back. And that's what Archway wants to do. Let us put our hand back to you.
Right.
Let us hold your hand. Let us help carry you through. Listen to our stories. Take in what you can. Discard what you can't right now. But one day, when you're in the place that you know your heart is a little more settled, let us tell your story. It's an ugly club, but stay in the club. If you got put in the club, stay in the club. There's a lot for you to offer, and there's a lot for you to pick up from that club.
Well, that's a good segue to do a shameless plug that we really, there's zero cost, zero charge to anybody that's lost someone too early for us to do a documentary and put it together for the family, and we want to keep it that way forever. It's a good piece of history that the family can have to watch over and over again. It helps other people, and so that's kind of the mission of what Archway is built on, is helping people provide hope for those who have lost someone too early. And so if you're listening to this podcast, please send us an email, a note, go to our Facebook page, YouTube, doesn't matter. Get in touch with us somehow. Share your story with us, whether you're in the United States or all over the world. It doesn't matter to us. Tell us your story. Get involved at some level, whether it's volunteer or just being a support, or if you financially want to support, that's awesome too. We need all of it. We're like every other nonprofit out there. We want to fix problems in the world. We want to help people, and we need a whole bunch of people to help us and support us. And so we strongly encourage you to do it.
Yeah.
We want to know you.
And if you know someone who's hurting in this capacity, send them our way. Shoot them a link. I really think they'll find something of value there. I really do. I'll stake my claim on that.
Yeah. And there's a lot of people who have a lot to offer. And we're starting the ball rolling, but we know there's other people that are going to find out about Archway Hope that say, hey, I have something to contribute. Wonderful.
Yes.
We can't wait. We can't wait to have
Somebody
other people
needs
help.
what you have to offer.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for listening to today's podcast. You can like and share, would be awesome. Visit us at our website, archwayofhope.org. We're on all social channels. You can follow us there. Our intent is to share solid information with people that are needing to hear this information and provide hope for those who have lost someone too early.